That's something in my own training, and just coaching other athletes that I've really come to
Hmm.
learn lately is just the importance of going based off of feel. And there's definitely there's a fine line between, not pushing hard enough because you don't feel like it, you're not mentally feeling like it, and then not pushing too hard because your body's just not ready for
Yes.
that type of training yet. Which I think that would be a good segue into your experience with some of these elite runners, and then working with the runners. It was in Ethiopia. Was that where it
Oh
was at?
yes, yeah. That was a really interesting experience. Um, because I came from a background in the UK then for several years working with top level athletes and understanding how we do it. And we've got a whole team of people supporting them, and they see the physio at least once, if not twice a week. And then you land in Ethiopia, and there's no physios in Ethiopia except one that was brought in by somebody's
Wow.
agent. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Then you also don't speak the language properly, so you've got a bit of a barrier, and then you've got a big distrust in people because it's funny in Ethiopia, especially, they seem to be worried to give away their edge. So there's a lot of things like that. So yeah, that was a really interesting experience to suddenly be in a situation where people don't actually necessarily trust you. Whereas in the UK, they absolutely trust what the physio says.
How long did you work with them for?
I just went to help somebody out for, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks there, but we also saw the
Okay.
athlete in the UK. We started the whole treatment journey in the UK, and then we just went and followed up in that period.
What was that experience like, just on a day-to-day basis for those couple of weeks? Like what kind of work were you guys doing with them?
Yes, so, well, there was a lot of strength training rehab, and then dovetailing that in with the running sessions and things as well. But what I found really super interesting was the how they varied their training and their training intensity, not by just running harder. So Addis Ababa is the capital of Ethiopia, is 3,000 meters, I think, above sea level. So that's high. I was just dead the whole
Yeah.
time. They must have thought, what a unfit physio, but I just went up the stairs and then I wanted to die. So what they would do is, if they wanted a hard training session and really push themselves, they would actually go higher above sea level even and train there that day. And if they really wanted an easy, super easy training day, they would drive a couple of hours to a lower point, so they've got more oxygen in
Oh,
the air,
wow.
and then train at that level. And of course, they don't really have rest days at that point because they train several times a day, even sometimes because their bodies have just built up this resilience over years and years and years. Um, and it's interesting because somebody who's new to running, when they read an article about how Mo Farah in the UK, for instance, trained, like 1 day rest in 10 days, then they go, oh, cool, I can run every day. It's like, yeah, but Mo has run for how many years? And
Yep.
that's kind of where the disconnect comes sometimes.
Wow. So they, instead of changing their training paces or the training effort, they would literally just go to different elevations and work
Yeah,
that
so
way.
they would switch it up in so many different ways. So they would change pace as well, but they would play with altitude, they would play with hills, they would all sorts of things that they could do there.
Were these mostly marathon runners or half marathon, or do you know what distances a lot of these guys were
Yeah,
training for?
it was proper. It was somebody who was really trying to get into the marathon, um, transitioning from track, really good track athlete, and then making that transition into marathon. Um, but yeah, it was interesting to understand for the first time how many of the top runners actually struggle with back injuries, which I,
Back
yes,
injuries.
which I never came across in the general distance running population. Whereas it was quite common for these guys to have sciatica and returning sciatica and issues with that. And just run through it because you know what distance runners are like. You don't feel any
Yep.
any pain really.
What where do you think that back those back injuries come from?
I think it's just a part of pushing yourself, the volume of what they do. Um, yeah, but it's, and then, yeah, if I think back to this person, it's a bit chicken and egg because they had a chronic calf injury at that point, and it could have been that the calf caused the back, but it could also have been that the back, because sometimes if you have a back injury and it affects your nerves, that's one of the key things that then can cause chronic calf issues. And especially those tears that reoccur that doesn't want to want to stop recurring.
That seems to be, um, another thing that I have to come to learn recently was, if your knee hurts, a lot of times it's not your knee that's actually the source of the injury. It's, might be your IT
Yeah.
band or something in your hip and vice versa. How do you go about diagnosing things like that where it's
Mm.
somebody's just, let's just use the knee, for example, their knee is just killing them. Um, but it might not actually be their knee that's hurt.
So the best advice a doctor ever gave me that I worked with, Dr. Webborn, he said, never, ever, ever trust your gut feel because your gut feel in medicine is so often wrong. You can have a good idea because when you tell me how you're injured and what your symptoms are, I can pretty much go 90% of the time that's going to be the issue. But what he always told me was, even if you're pretty sure, test the things above, test the things below, and make doubly sure, because the number of times that you'll find something that you didn't expect to find. So yeah, that's the big thing. And it's really quick to screen for it. There are simple movement tests that you can just, for instance, for the sciatic nerve, there's a slump test where you can just bend forwards and get the patient to do certain things, and then you know what you expect to see, and you just check for differences.